So as we're talking about the what, again, we should be looking at and evaluating the opening statement for expectations. Is there an established concept that a decision is going to be made by both the prospective student and San Joaquin Valley College? The interview, what is their motivation? What is it about the this time, this day that drew them in? We should be evaluating how effective our advisors are at determining that. The tour, it's all about me. The me should be the student. It should be individualized and not just about the process or about the advisor. And again, the summary, are our advisors actually providing a close at the end of the meeting? We have a next step, which is, are our advisors effectively establishing what is the next step? It's a lot easier now because they have a card, all right, that they should be distributing to our prospective students, and that should generate the initial conversation. Okay, this is what we've talked about. Let's talk about what your next step are. Oh, and by the way, do you feel this is a good opportunity or this is the right choice for you? Okay, so that helps even with the close. But the next step, that's what they're utilizing the next step cards. And again, we should be evaluating how effective. It's not just a tool to be thrown out. It's a tool that should be used effectively. Okay. The how of doing observations. I think there's I know for me personally, there's been kind of a progression on, I think, my role as an observer and how I conduct observations. Am I just monitoring to make sure that the steps are done, or am I actually observing? Okay, am I observing what the advisor is doing? Am I observing how they're doing it? I think it's very important that there should be a lot of connectivity, okay, that we should be looking for. And by connectivity, is the advisor actually connecting with the student? I think rapport is really one of the most important factors that our advisors should be establishing, is that rapport with the prospective student. So is there that connectivity? Is, based upon the interview, is that student actually feeling connected to the school? Did the tour accomplish that? Can they now see themselves as being a student at San Joaquin Valley College? So I think we should be looking for connectivity. In doing observations, one thing I've noticed is that sometimes certain advisors may have different feelings about the observation and its value. I know I have some advisors who are very strong in their belief in their effectiveness. So when I do observations, they're kind of like, okay, here he is again. Okay, this has no value for me. I don't know what, or this was, or I would say initially when I started doing observations, the perception. So he's just sitting here because this is what he has to do. I have nothing to learn from this. Okay, so hopefully Marcus will just sit there and not say anything, just take his notes, and then we'll be done, because I know he has to do a couple of these, every start cycle. So in that particular case, I had to kind of show value in what the observation can provide for that particular advisor. But knowing how that advisor feels, how I conduct my observation with that particular advisor may differ than how I conduct my observation with another advisor. So I have another one of my advisors who actually I would consider probably my top advisor. However, she gets very nervous when she knows she's being evaluated. So I noticed a difference in her persona whenever I was sitting in the room. And that's not the purpose of the observation. The purpose of the observation is to observe what she would do naturally. So in that particular instance, my response to the observation is somewhat different. I'm actually a little more participatory. Okay, I get a little more involved when appropriate in that particular interview. If she looks at me, I know maybe she's wanting me to, she has a question, or if the student, I'm a little more participatory in that particular interview. Again, but that's based upon the needs of the particular advisor and also the situation. Okay, so it's more an act of observing the situation and how that particular meeting is going, and observing your particular advisors and knowing what's going to be more effective with that specific advisor. Notes. For me personally, I have a notebook and I just take notes on the things I want to focus on for that particular interview. There is actually, I know when we were doing one of our changes, there was a grid. I actually have revised that and thought about using it. I did once and it was fine. But for those of you who kind of like that structure, I have an actual grid where it just breaks down basically.
Everyone has it.
Oh, do they? Okay, all right. So some of you might feel more comfortable with that, just in making sure that you're kind of making notes in each of the specific areas. So, you know, it's whatever is going to be effective for you in that particular situation. So, okay, great. So we do have the grid also. So that, you know, that can be a tool that can help you be more effective if you're not comfortable, especially maybe for some of the newer advisors. You know, I'm not sure what your role with observations was previously, but this might be a tool that could assist you. So again, there's your notes. Giving feedback. When I first started doing observations, as I took down notes and thought about it afterwards, I probably had, oh man, there are 5 things that this particular advisor probably should be working on. Okay. Well, if I presented those 5 things, I kind of got this deer in the headlights look, and not a very receptive response. Okay, so now you want me to change these 5 things immediately. Okay, that's not really an effective way of providing feedback. What I've found to be more effective is choosing probably one area, possibly 2, where there is room for growth and room for improvement. And then that's the area that I'm focusing on as I'm providing feedback. So I say 1 issue at a time is probably better. You know, possibly 2. You know, of course, there's a compliance issue. That's something that needs to be addressed immediately. So I try to keep it really to 1 issue at a time. Sooner the better. Oftentimes in our day-to-day, we might complete an observation, and the intent is to, I'm going to meet with the advisor right away afterwards, but all of a sudden I have an acceptance interview that needs to be done. So then that's delayed, and next thing you know, okay, I'll plan to provide the feedback in the morning. We'll get together, maybe I'll do it during our morning meeting or something of that nature. Well, what I've found is the more effective method is providing that feedback, the sooner the better. Meaning, in my mind, what I wanted to focus on, my thoughts about how the interview went are fresher, of course, immediately following the particular observation. Also, I found that the advisor is more receptive to what I have to say, because they feel it's really, the feedback is just an extension of the actual observation. Okay. I even now have a couple of advisors that will, after I've done the observation, will be like, okay, so what did you think? Okay. And of course, that's the ideal situation. The first time that happened, I almost fell out of my chair. But what that demonstrates is that that advisor now sees the value of what the observation process is meant to instill. So the sooner the better. Documenting. CView is your friend.
Yep.
On my team, I have advisors who document a lot. I also have advisors who document very little. So I'm assuming maybe we as ESDs might fall within a similar range when it comes to documentation. I won't say which area I'm in, but I think that changes from time to time depending upon the situation. But I try to document as much as possible for a couple of reasons. First off, it really helps me, and really putting my thoughts on kind of on paper, if you will, transferring it from the notes or from the grid into CView. It really helps me think about what I saw, what I observed, and what potentially I want to change. So the more information, the better when it comes to documenting. And yes, CView is my friend, because if it's not in CView, it didn't happen. So I believe in really documenting as much as possible when it comes to completing observations. Preparation. When I first started doing observations, I just, okay, it's week 4 and I've got 8 to do, so I need to do these right away. Oops, should I not have said that? The reality is that what I found is my observations are a lot more effective when I actually prepare for them. So I'm going to talk about the when in a moment. But what I have found is that effective preparation means actually referring back to the last observation I did, and what were my notes? What was that one or maybe two things that I advised the advisor, this is what you need to work on? Okay? So by me referring back to that prior to me doing an observation, it gives me an opportunity to really assess and evaluate their progress in that specific area. And again, if they have performed well in that area, that provides another opportunity for me to provide recognition and praise. You know, last time I observed you, we talked about you, Denise, you did a great job on that this time, okay? Adding value to the process of the observation. So that really, I believe, should be part of the preparation process and preparing for future interviews, future observations. I'm sorry. The win, scheduling. C-View Contact Manager. What I have found works for me, because again I did struggle with completing the minimum number of observations. What I have found works for me is actually going in and scheduling a pending activity for the actual observation, so that it's not week 4 and I'm wondering, oh, how many did I do? I know it felt like I did 2 observations for him, but I'm not sure. So going in the beginning of the mod and just scheduling it. I've tried different things when it comes to how am I going to schedule and perform observations. I've tried, well, this week I'm going to target this advisor or these 2 advisors. I've even tried to schedule. Scheduling, what I found has worked for me again is actually going in, putting a pending activity for each of the observations that I'm hoping to complete on this on my advisors on my team. That I think has worked. The ESD Observation Log. How many of you have used the log? Yay, it's on C-View under Admissions Management Documents. That's another tool that I've used to help me ensure that I am completing my my observations. Again, just it's kind of a backup. I'm more of a paper person, so that helps also. Second week, another I would say strategy I have used is trying to actually, when we talk about the scheduling, I've tried to schedule my observations in week 2. Week 1 probably is, you know, not always the strongest time as far as my availability to do observations. So what I found is trying to schedule them in week 2 is a great opportunity, because when I don't make them all by week 2, guess what? I've got week 3 and 4 and 5. So scheduling them during week 2 I have found has been real effective for me. Ta-da! We have the question mark. So that means there are questions and answer time. In closing, as far as the presentation, I will say that this really was an area I struggled in, not because it isn't important, but just because it's a matter of scheduling it out and how to make it effective. And honestly, it was kind of my attitude towards the whole observation purpose and process. So I think once I overcame kind of my attitude as it being just something I have to do, and understanding that there's value in that, because we as ESDs, our role is to really build a better team. As we discussed earlier, there are some things in place, that some tools, some maybe changes that will help our team be more effective, but it's also our role as ESDs are to build a better team with the team that we have. So again, ensuring that they're compliant, that they're effective, and that they are doing the job as should be, I think is part of our role as ESDs. I have a couple of handouts in doing my research, not only for the presentation but previously, that I would be more than happy to forward to everyone. One of those is, of course, with approval. Observation techniques, something I found on the internet, as well as another article that talks about building top-selling sales teams. It talks about 5 aspects. It's more geared towards hiring salespeople, but I think it's effective when we talk about ensuring that our advisors are effective. So, with that being said, any questions and/or answers? Hopefully, I can provide the answers. Yes.
When you conduct your observations, are you sitting with the advisor and the prospect in their office, or are you observing from outside of the office?
Excellent question. Depends on the advisor. I mentioned I have one particular advisor who was very awkward with me doing observations. So a lot of times with that particular advisor, if she's conducting an interview with one person, I may sit across from her, so it's not as awkward. She doesn't feel then I'm just a part of the process. With my other advisor, who is very, he knows he's good at what he does, then usually I'm sitting actually in the chair, kind of next to the advisor, kind of in the background on the side. Yeah. So excellent question. Yes.
Do you have a system or anyone else to add in that's really helped take? You mentioned you just work on one or two things. Great, one focus. How do you track their utilization of those suggestions thereafter? So it's Tuesday, you have that debrief, they need to work on changing a word track, maybe it's asking for the PDF. How do you keep track of everyone who's working on what, and then reporting back from them on Wednesday? Did you use that strategy? Did it work? Thursday, Friday, that training to practice piece. Does anyone have suggestions for that? Sol has a large team now, so I'm thinking of trying to manage those points of coaching for each one of them. If anyone has any systems or tips.
I'll throw it out to the group, but for me personally, because that is a challenge, especially I can imagine with a larger team.
That's where the change in behavior comes.
One thing I try to do is if I'm doing my applicant interviews, I will try to do them with that advisor close to one another. Also, when I'm doing applicant interviews, I also use that potentially as an opportunity to do a call observation. So if I'm doing an applicant interview and then an advisor takes an incoming call, okay, that's a great opportunity for me to take notes on that specific call. So basically, I'm focusing for that short period of time on that advisor. But it is a challenge beyond, say, 3 weeks later to know, what one or two areas I focused on before. So does anyone have any other tools or strategies that have been accessible? Ms. Susie?
I walk the halls. Yeah, I walk the halls and I listen. I don't necessarily sit in and do a follow-up, to see, did they implement it? I'm walking the halls to listen to see if they've implemented the change, and then I debrief.
Because I like to call my lovely ESDs in and read all those observations and then say, like, you said so-and-so's working on this. How's it going? Did it get better? How many times have you seen them since then?
Yes.
So I wanted, strategies.
Yes.
A good point you made was you put everything in Canvas view. And, we had an issue when you remember with our last shock that this really worked out. We had an advisor who just didn't get the consumer information, especially the accreditation, just fumbled terribly. And what Susie said is true, and in addition to that, your advisors will tattle on each other. If they hear somebody's really doing something, and you don't have to play on it, but you certainly can take mind of it. And so I put notes in Canvas View about this problem, and maybe 2 or 3 times it was getting better, this and that, and come to find out she got shocked, and it was exactly, the problem in the shop was exactly what we had been working on. So it was wonderful that I could go back. The shop was old because we had a little issue with the vendor, so it was back several months. But it was great that I could go back and say, yes, Wendy, that's absolutely correct. We were working on that. That was an issue. But that initial problem came from the other advisor saying, you know what, you better listen to this. Yes. This is an issue, and you have to be up out of your seat and with them all the time.
And if they aren't improving, it gives you an opportunity for a performance improvement plan.
And again, I think the value of what Trish is saying, discussing especially compliance issues, during your weekly team meeting, helps make sure everyone is aware. If you have advisors, if you're doing observations and you're seeing consistent problems with the same, within the same team, of course that gives you an opportunity to address that as a whole. Any other questions?
I have one.
Yes.
How do you manage the demands on your time at the campus to ensure that you juggle whatever those demands are that are outside of observing and working with your advisors to meeting those observation standards? So you have this committee, this leadership meeting, that development meeting, whatever those are, because I don't really know. and managing your time to meet those observations.
Everyone here is on the 18-hour-a-day workday, right?
No.
No.
Yeah?
It's prioritizing. It really is prioritizing. I mean, you know, our students come first. To me, is always the most important. Ensuring that our people are compliant, you know, because we got to keep the doors open. And it's really just prioritizing. To me, observations have become an important part because if my advisors are better at what they do, that actually reduces the time I spent on putting out fires. So it's definitely a prioritization.
So if you're doing your observations, who's conducting acceptance?
That's a hard part for me.
Yes,
Yeah.
you know, from sitting in both seats, you know, it all comes from that seat. If your campus director expects you to do your observations and they expect to be done, and you have a one-on-one every week and they say, here you are, where are you going to be? Or you didn't do anything, or you've done too much, or what are you doing? Then
She has post-traumatic stress.
The culture comes from the top. Either your campus expects you to do observations, get them all done, or they don't. You know, the campus director sets the trend. They really do. And as far as who does the acceptance interview, anybody else in leadership. We had a training in our weekly meeting where we trained everybody else in leadership, and the culture changed. They knew it was just as much their responsibility as anybody else's.
On our campus, on the Temecula campus, you know, the different departments, we truly work together as a team. I've trained on doing acceptances. I will also, if again, when it comes to maybe scheduling, you know, pending activity, I'll have a discussion possibly with my campus director. I'm planning on doing observations today. You know, so she knows that, you know, I may need someone else to assist with acceptances. I let my first contact know that, you know, my goal is to get observations done today. So when someone comes in for an applicant interview, call me and let me know. Because that was a challenge. Even if I had it scheduled, you know, I'd be like, okay, I missed the intro. So, you know, my first contacts are involved in that. So, you know, hey, I'm focusing it today. Anytime someone comes in for an interview, call me and let me know.